In this part 4 of modeling better windows for environment design in Maya, we are going to go into how to create circular windows. First, we're going to start off with a very easy variation. Just a circular window with glass without any frames or panels. Then we're going to move on to the second variation, where we add a bit more detail. Third variation will include even more panel and framing. Fourth variation will do a lot more variations of paneling that you can play around with, depending on what type of reference of a circular window you're trying to create. And then I'm going to show you how to create frames or the panels as separate pieces of geometry without having to model them in ahead of time like we do for the first 4 variations. So a lot of things are covered in this one, and everything we've covered in the past 3 parts come into play in this one as well. So if you haven't seen the first, second, and third part, I recommend that you start there because everything kind of builds on top of each other in order to get to this point to part 4. For the very first variation, we're going to keep things simple. So I'm bringing back the wall that we've been using. It's 300 by 300 centimeters in height and width, and then 20 in depth. And for most of these examples, I'm going to use a technique or a modeling tool called circularize. But you could also use booleans for this as well by introducing a cylinder and then creating a different boolean operation to cut out the cylinder, the circular part from the wall. But I am going to use circularize. The end result will be the same. So to use circularize, I need extra geometry inside this wall. I need to create extra cuts. So I'm going to go to Modeling Toolkit and I'm going to introduce extra edges. So I'm going to hold down Control, middle mouse click, so it places right in the center, and middle mouse click to create one across here. One horizontally, one vertically. Now let me switch over back to faces. I'm going to select these faces as well as the ones on the back. For this example, I'm actually going to create more of a cutout, a circular hole through the wall. Even at this point, we are not ready to circularize yet. Usually you need a minimum of 4 faces to successfully circularize, but we still can't do it because we don't have kind of a protective border to circularize. So if I go ahead and do this now just to show you, if I go to Edit Mesh, Circularize, it's going to collapse my object. So let me undo. So I'm going to take these 4 faces on each side and I'm going to do an extrusion, Control E with offset, creating a border around it to protect so that way I can circularize successfully. And now let's go ahead and go to Edit Mesh and Circularize. Now we can go ahead and create a circle. I don't have enough geometry here. This is very low poly, so I'm going to go to divisions and let's add 2 divisions. This will introduce a lot of floating verts, but we can go ahead and fix them in a bit. But now I've created a circle within my wall. Let me go back to object mode and I want to bring back that menu that I had. So I'm going to press T for transform, and this will bring back the menu, the last used menu that I had, which was for circularize. So I want to go ahead and maybe adjust a few options here. So I can do radial offset, just make it smaller. Just basically define how big do I want this wall cutout to be. And let me switch back to object mode. And before I take these faces and begin to extrude them and do whatever I would need to do for the window, let me fix this right here. Because sometimes we get cause some problems when you begin to extrude, when you have n-gons. So I'm gonna use multi-cut for this, and just left click, hold, and drag, and just create triangles. Basically, just removing the n-gons, and I'm gonna do this for both sides. So I'm just left clicking, hold, and drag until it meets at a vertex, and then left click, hold, and drag it on the edge again, and go all the way to another vertex. Press enter to complete the multi-cut. And then I'm just doing this for every single one. So I'm going to quickly speed up the video so you get to see it in the sped up version. So you don't have to sit here and watch me do this for every single one, including the back. And here we are. Now let's go ahead and select these 4 faces and on both sides. So it's going to be 8 faces selected. And now we can go ahead and extrude. We can extrude inside and then create the window. We can delete these faces and then create that connection between here using bridge. So for example, if I was just going to cut out through a wall and not have any glass, just basically a window cutout, I would select all those edges on both sides and we can bridge them. If I was going to keep this and just create more of a definition here and maybe keep the glass. Let's go ahead and extrude and add some thickness. And actually, before I do that, let me create a tiny little border around it. So I went ahead and undid. Let me select these faces again. I'm going to press Ctrl E to extrude, and I'm going to do an offset. Let's do an offset of 5. So that way I create a tiny little border. And now let's go ahead and extrude with thickness. And just push that in. Now I'm going to delete these 4 faces in the back. I don't need them because I want to go ahead and extract these 4, and that's going to be my glass. Again, glass will receive its own material, so that way you can display two-sided material on both sides. But in this case, I am going to extract it so I can go ahead and close up this gap. So let's select these 4. Let's extract. Let me isolate my wall and just fix this up right here. So I'm going to double click on this edge, hold Shift, double click on this edge. I'm going to bridge it. And I don't need all these segments right here, all these edges. So I'm going to double click to select the continuous edge loop and press Ctrl Delete and remove it, because I don't, it's just too many edges that are not adding anything to the geometry. I'm going to double click on this and I'm going to press Ctrl Delete to remove this edge. The reason I'm pressing Ctrl Delete is because it will remove the floor inverts. Under Edit Mesh, you'll find the shortcut key right here, Delete Edge Vertex. Let's go ahead and do a bit more. I'm going to select this face right here, hold Shift, double click on the face next to it, and do the same thing on the other side, hold Shift, select this face, hold Shift, double click on the face next to it. I'm going to do an extrusion here, Ctrl E, add a bit of thickness. Let's do a thickness of 2.5. Maybe even clean this up further. I don't need those unless I'm going to do something with the interior, maybe extrude it further. Maybe let's do that. Create another tiny little border. I'm going to select this face, hold Shift, double click on this one right here. Let's do a Ctrl E and do a bit of thickness. Let's do a thickness of 2.5. Let me bring back the glass I had, Ctrl 1. And here we created our first simple circular window with some borders. Now we do have a problem right here. You can see we can see the faceted look to our circular edges. So easy way to fix this, let me go ahead and isolate it, Ctrl 1, is I'm going to enable hard and soft edges so I can see which edges are soft and which edges are hard. I'm going to hold on Shift, right click, hold, do this through a shortcut menu, go to Soften Harden Edges, toggle Soft Edge Display. So these edges right here should be soft. They should be a dashed line. Any dashed line you see is a soft edge. Any solid line is a hard edge. So the reason we're seeing a faceted look right here is because all of these are hard edges. So I just need to switch them over to a soft edge instead. So I'm going to select a single edge first, hold Shift, double click on the edge next to it. It's going to select the entire edge ring and then switch them over to a soft edge. So I'll do the drop down menu for this. It'll be under Mesh Display, Harden Edge or Soften Edge, and I need Soften Edge. And now that's been fixed. Let me introduce back the glass. And here we have it. Now, of course, I can go in and add a bit more geometry by beveling these corners so they look better. Right now, this 90-degree corner is not very aesthetically appealing, but we've been doing bevels this entire series, so now you know how to do them and you can do them on your own. But here's how you create a simple circular window cut out with glass. Let's do the second variation, but we're going to introduce a bit more geometry, some paneling inside the circular window. Let me bring back the wall. I'm going to duplicate it. And we're going to repeat the same thing. In this particular example, I'm moving forward. I am not going to create the back. I'm only going to focus on the front. So that means I'm only going to select this face right here and deal with it alone without the back. So again, we need to introduce extra geometry in here. So I'm going to use a multi-cut. And let's do our cuts. Hold Control, middle mouse click, and middle mouse click. One vertical, one horizontal. I'm going to select these 4 faces and then extrude them because we need to contain a circularize within the extrusion. So Control E, let's do an offset. The size of this doesn't really matter right now because we can always scale our circularize by using the menu or manually scale it. So as long as I have this protected border, now I can go ahead and circularize. With these 4 faces selected, let's go to Edit Mesh, circle rise, and I'm going to add divisions. Let's do 2 divisions again. Then let's adjust our radial offset. And I want to go ahead and move this up. So it's like a small circular window. It's going to be a little closer to the top of the wall. So for this, I'm just going to hit W and just move that up like so. Now let's go ahead and extrude this. I'm going to try to extrude this without having to fix it. But if that causes some issues here, then I'll have to fix these N-gons first. So I'm going to do Control E to extrude. And let's add some thickness. So I'm going to create a bit of an indent into the wall first, like so. Seems to be okay. So we can always fix that later instead of doing it before we extrude. Then let's create a bit of a border. So I'm going to select these 4 faces. And actually I can go ahead and extrude all 4 faces together again with key faces together off actually. And then it will create the paneling for each window. Let's do Control E. And I'm going to key faces together off. I'm going to do an offset. So that way we isolate each face to be extruded independently, thus creating our borders that we needed. And let's do an offset of 3. And then I'm going to do another extrusion, Control E, and let's do thickness. For this one, let's do -3. And here we have a bit more detail inside the window. We have some paneling. As you can see, many of the same techniques apply. It's just a matter of having the extra geometry to extrude and just knowing what you want, what kind of reference you're going off in order to create your circular window. Let's do another quick pass, and for this one, let's do bevels. So I'm going to switch over to edge. I'm going to double click on this edge. It's not going to select all the way around. And actually, before I do my bevels, let's go ahead and quickly fix this. So I'm going to run through the same multi-cut fix that I did for the previous window, using multi-cut, and I'm just gonna create extra edges and remove the N-gons. And so for this one, I will also speed things up and quickly fix this without you having to see it. Now when it comes to these right here, these extra edges right here in the cross may not be necessary, so we could target weld them. Let's see if that works. I'm going to use target weld, and I'm just going to take this first. I'm just going to target weld to the bottom. And actually, yep, that works. So we don't need this running across our geometry. We can simplify this. And we can actually simplify it all the way in the back. Just running a quick optimization. Here we go. Now, with that fix, I can go ahead, let me delete history quickly. I'm going to do my bevels. So I'm going to double click on this. It selects all of the edges around. Let's do Control B. Let's do 2 segments and a smaller fraction, 0.25. And then let's do another one across here. Hold Shift and just add to a selection. So these are going to be for the borders. Let me undo. Here we go, that's what I need. And this one. And let me deselect this edge. Whenever you are doing bevels, you got to be very careful. You want to make sure you select the right edges to bevel. And if one is missing, that usually creates a lot of problems for you to fix. So always double check before you bevel. And let's Control B to bevel. For this one, I'm going to also do 2 segments and a smaller fraction. Let's do 0.2. And then let me go back to object mode, hit Alt 5 to remove wireframe unshaded, and just see how it worked out. And here we have a circular window with a lot more detail, nicer corners for the bevels, instead of 90-degree corner angles, and that looks pretty good. And of course we could also do our last fix, and which you should, and you would just need to fix where the glass would be by removing those nasty N-gons. And you would do that for all the windows, for all of the glass panels. Another quick way to, instead of using multi-cut, to connect 2 vertices with an edge is you switch over to Vertex component mode, select the 2 edges you want to create an edge in between, and instead of using multi-cut for this, you use connect components. So these 2 verts are selected, then you go to Edit Mesh and choose Connect. And then all you need to do is just press G to repeat the last used tool. which is connect. Now this connect right here, edit mesh connect, is different than the connect option that you see inside the modeling toolkit. And let's do one more. Sometimes this is a little faster. And here we are. We have a nicer looking circular window cutout with a lot more detail, some paneling. And here's the second variation for circular window. Let's do a third variation of a circular window, but even more detail will be put in here with more borders. So we're basically going to isolate quite a few different panels. Instead of having just the 4 panels of glass here, we'll do even more so. So I'm going to introduce this wall back. And I'm going to quickly do the whole setup for the circularized to work. So multi-cut, insert a couple across. Then I'm going to switch over to faces, select these 4 faces. I'm going to ignore the back. Control E to extrude. Let's do offset. And let's do circularize. Add a couple of divisions. So we have a nicer circularize. And let's make it smaller. Like so. Maybe a little bit more. And I'm going to also duplicate this. Move it over here for the next version up. So that way I don't have to redo this again. Let's come back. So for this, I'm going to select the faces. Let's do extrude with offset. Let's do offset of 5. That's going to give me a tiny little border that I may want. And let's do another extrusion. I'm going to add some thickness to this. Just push that back. And right now, if I were to extrude these 4 faces, it would give me the same result as this. If I were to extrude with keep faces together off. However, what if I want more panels in here? That means I need extra geometry. And then we can extrude all those faces individually with keep faces together off. So for this, I'm going to use multi-cut. And I'm going to cut this up even more. So I'm going to introduce multiple cuts across here, one below here. Since I already have the geometry, I'm just going to make those cuts and I already have 4 faces on each side. And let's do another one across down here. So I introduce even more. So now we have more faces on each side. So we have 8. And let's do another 8. So we have 8 faces on each side. So basically we have 16 faces that we can go ahead and extrude and create individual little frames and glass panels for each. Let's select them all. I'm going to hold on Tab, paint a selection. I have 16 faces selected. Let's go ahead and extrude. Control E, keep faces together off. And let's do an offset. And for this, let's do an offset of 2.5. And then let's do another extrusion, and that will be our glass. Control E, let's do a thickness. And let's do a thickness of negative 2.5 as well. Let's go back to object mode, and here's what we have. We have a lot more panel cutouts for each glass, a lot more geometry now, and looks more of a kind of like an Asian style window. Then of course you can do your bevel passes, so make it look a lot nicer. But as long as you introduce the extra geometry and pre-plan of the cuts so you have individual faces for you to extrude, you can go ahead and model everything into the same piece of geometry with simple extrude offset and thickness. For the 4th variation, we'll do something similar, but we'll do just a different panel. Instead of doing something like this, we'll do more detailed than just for glass panel, but a different combination. So I'm gonna use this. Let's select the face. We already did a circularize for this. Let's do Control E. Let's introduce a tiny border around it. Let's say 5 as well. Oh, just a little side note. We didn't do anything to this border. So let me come back to this real quick. Let's select these, and I can do Control E to extrude, add a bit of thickness. Let's do a thickness of 2.5. And we have a tiny little border around it. So this is why I introduced this first, so we can do something with. And I forgot to do that on that one. Let me switch over to faces. So we introduce a little border for later. Then let's repeat another extrusion, Control E. This time I'm gonna add some thickness. Let's do negative 10. Let's do another extrusion, Control E. I'm gonna do an offset, like so. Let's do an offset. This one I'm gonna just freehand style it. I'm not gonna input a value here, something like this. And now what I have here is a different combination of faces that I can extrude with offset. I have these 4. I can actually do them separately, or I can do them together. I can also do a combination of these faces. For example, I can do 3, 3, 3 all the way across, or I can do all of these right here. I can extrude them together so they can be one panel. So the amount of combinations that I can do here is quite a lot. Again, it all depends on the reference that you're looking at trying to replicate. So let's do these 4 faces first. I'm going to do Control E. Let's keep them all together. I'm going to do an offset of 2.5. And I'm going to remember these values because I have to do a lot of these separately. The extrusions with offset, they're going to be done separately instead of all together at the same time in order for this version, in order for this variation to work. So I did my offset 2.5. Let's do another one, and let's do negative 2.5. So that gives me the glass. Then let's say I want these faces right here to be extruded. So all of these are going to be glass. Now I cannot select all of them and to extrude because then they'll be extruded all at the same time or individually. So I just have to do them separately. So I'm going to do Control E. Let's do offset of 2.5. Let's do Control E, negative 2.5. And then I'll repeat all of this for the rest of it. So let me go ahead and select these. Control E, offset 2.5, another extrusion, negative 2.5. So here's what I'm having so far. Kind of hard to see. Let me turn that back on. So we have glass right here. We have a little paneling. We have another portion of glass and frames around it. This would be glass right here in the center. Let's do select these right here. Control E to extrude and just continue repeating this. 2.5, Control E, and negative 2.5. And then one more time for these. So the way I'm selecting everything in between is I'm selecting one face, holding down Shift, double clicking on the face away from it, and it selects everything in between. And let's do another extrusion, 2.5, and another extrusion, but this time it's thickness, negative 2.5. So here's what we have for this version. And then you can really push this when you have the faces for you to work with. So let me kind of get back to what I had before. So I'm going to speed this video up. I'm basically going to come back to the version that we had before the extrusions. All right, here we are. So for this, I am actually, let's try dealing with all these faces. They're all going to be separate. This might be fun. So let me see if I can do this all at the same time. I already have these 4 selected, so I'm going to grow my selection. So I select everything else. So I'm going to hold down Shift, period. Let's see if we can do an extrusion, keep faces together off, and do an offset. Let's do an offset of 2.5. And then let's do another offset and negative 2.5. Now the reason I'm using these values is just you pick one that you like and you just kind of repeat them over and over again. If you like the thickness of this, you know, it depends how depth of the window where the glass you want to be, as well as how thick do you want the borders to be. So we have here we have another circular window that has a lot more paneling and glass into it. So as long as you have the faces that you pre-plan into it, you can do quite a lot of different variations depending on which faces you choose first to extrude, and then just repeat the same selection somewhere else and do the same extrusion with offset and thickness. And for the very last variation, I'm going to come back to this one, and we can create the frames, the little borders, from extra geometry that we introduce later. So for a lot of these, we created all these window frames within the circular window during our modeling for all of single one of these. But if you have a simple version of this, you can create the frames yourself. So a lot of times you may need some intricate frames, some circular portions, some kind of very intricate design that may be harder to model in with just simple extrusion, offset, and thickness. So as long as you create the circular window, you can go ahead, have the glass, that's one piece of geometry, and then just go ahead and create extra paneling to place within the window. So for example, let's go ahead and introduce a cube. Let's go to front view. And let me raise this up. Let's make it larger, like so. And I'm just going to scale it. And let me go ahead and snap it. And let's just move this all the way up here, move this all the way down here. So it's overlapping. Let's take a look where exactly it's at. Let's move it forward. Actually, let's move the glass back a little bit. Let me center the pivot to this. Center pivot, you can find it under Modify Center Pivot. I have it on my custom tool shelf. So let's move the glass back. So here is our paneling. So that's one. I can go ahead and duplicate, Control D, and then maybe rotate. I'm gonna hold down J to rotate snap. Let's say 45 degrees. While I still have it selected, I can rotate with transform by hitting Shift D a couple of times, and then we'll just keep the rotation at 45 degrees and duplicate it across like so. And now we have some paneling. Now we do have some overlap right here. I'll show you how to fix it in just a second. Let me introduce another one. Actually, let's go ahead and fix it. I'm going to introduce another border, a circular border that you can input by using a different primitive instead of a cube. So right now we've duplicated this. They're all aligned together, but we have a problem because all of these faces are overlapping each other. So to fix this portion is you can combine using booleans. So I'm going to select them all. If you were to just go to mesh combine, nothing would be fixed. All of these objects would be combined, but the faces here would not be fixed. They'll still be overlapping. In order to combine everything as one object and basically have no faces overlapping here, you go and use booleans. I go through booleans in the home study course in extensive detail how to use it properly. In this example, we're going to use union. Union will combine all the selected objects as one. And not just combine, but it will fuse them together and merge them as one. So with them selected, I'm going to go to Mesh, Booleans, and use Union. Now every single face has been merged together as one. So no overlapping faces anymore. And I did it to both sides. Let me go ahead and delete history to remove the Boolean operation and to kind of finalize it. And this does require, and all Booleans do require some cleanup. So if you ever needed to clean this up, let's go to Model and Toolkit and Target Weld. And now we just target weld a lot of floating inverts together, like so. And basically just clean a lot of this up. You would have to do this to the other side as well. And then maybe even do a bit more of multi-cut to kind of cut this up a little bit better. You can even do a nicer topology, but this should work, no problem. So now we have a single element. We have some borders on both sides. And then let's say if you wanted to do more of a circular portion of a border instead of just straight, you go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and use a pipe. Pipe gives you a circular object that you can control inside the inputs. You have radius, height, thickness. Let me go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees. Hold J, rotate. Let me position it in the center where I would want it. Right over here. I'm going to go ahead and snap this right into on the grid right here. And then let's position it where I need it. Just move it back. And let me go to top. Basically, I just want to snap it on the grid, just kind of align with my glass. And now I just need to start modifying its properties. So let's say radius, let's try 50. And let's give a bit of thickness. Let's do height of 3, 2, no, let's skip that. Let's do radius, keep the radius the same right now. Let's do thickness of 1, maybe 2. Let's maybe even give more subdivisions, 24, so it's a little more rounded. Maybe we can go even higher. We can go ahead and start scaling this as well to give more thickness, and as well as scaling them this way. And maybe a little bit less. So now we've introduced another border within a singular pane glass. So you can see you have quite a lot of freedom of the design if you do your borders this way. And instead of modeling them in within the geometry itself by using the faces. So circular windows can be a lot of fun to create, and I've given you a lot of different variations and a lot of different techniques to create them. And remember, final note, do clean up your geometry at the end. You know, things like if you're going to use booleans, do clean the booleans up as well. Coming back here, I didn't do a lot of cleanup, but you would want to fix your endguns by using multi-cut. So don't leave your endguns hanging, and then don't let Maya or a game engine triangulate them for you. Sometimes you could create some really bad topology, and you want to control your fixing inside Maya first, like we did right here. So that way you control your topology, as well as do your bevel passes on the geometry that you need in order to introduce more rounded corners, better looking geometry, like we did on this variation right here, and how we did in many of the past videos within this series. Now, to learn more about circularize, how to use it on different type of objects, not just on a flat plane or a cube, but on cylindrical objects as well as spherical, as well as how to properly use booleans, which is a very powerful modeling tool that you should know about, especially in 2023, where Maya introduced live boolean option. I cover all of that in the second module of the Maya Foundation Homesteading course. Download it, watch it, learn it, and become a better, faster modeler.